All right, we're going to look at writing a brass Soli, and I'm of course using Dorico for this. And I came up with some simple guidelines here that I think can be helpful for getting started, especially if you're haven't written either brass Soli or shout section yet. And remember, these are just like guidelines to get started. I think there's some effective things in here, but of course, like after you've written something, the editing process and figuring out like, do I actually like this melodic line? What can I change? All of those things are sort of vital, I think, to making it interesting. But I think this is a good place to start. Quickly going over these, right? So no more than 3 notes in a bar. All right, it's maybe the most controversial one. We're going to avoid the root and the third of these 3 notes, but it could be in either the first or second notes. We're going to try to have it be as syncopated as possible. So we're going to say only one note can fall on a downbeat. Using combinations of short and long sounds. All right, I think that's good. Once you create a phrase, consider displacing it later on by 1/8 note. Jim McNeely uses this to devastating effect in many of his arrangements. Pickups are always cool, right? We always like anticipating. This is sort of like a follow-up to that particular idea that if you are anticipating a chord, you can think of this as if you only get 3 notes per bar, you can get sort of a bonus 4th note by anticipating it in the measure before. Hopefully that makes sense. And then, of course, thinking about range. If the line goes above C on the treble clef staff, then it'll be easier to harmonize and you'll get sort of a more full brass sound. If it's going below, then we might need more unison trumpets. All right. So with that in mind, we should craft something for these 8 bars. This is the B section to Our Love Is Here to Stay. Right. And of course, there's lots of places we could start or sort of target. The chord progression here is 2-5 going to G, then a 2-5 going to F, or a 3-6-2-5-1, all going to F. So maybe like a great place to start would be doing something that anticipates this G minor chord, right? And we can just use logic here a little bit to figure out like what would be ideal, right? If we're just thinking sort of chord tones or colors, right? This G is probably on the low side. That A is probably on the low side. B flat's okay. C is okay, but that's like it's the 11th on G minor. We would really have to be, we would get like probably 6-part harmony to effectively use that. That seems fine. We're going to avoid E for now. F, G, maybe A, right? So realistically, we sort of have this spectrum here of B flat up to A that we're going to use. And we're going to sort of target this. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and stretch that note over. Now, how would we want to get to this B, right? If we get one note that's on a beat and one note that's off a beat, because remember our rule was we could only have one note fall on a downbeat, everything else has to be syncopated. We could come up with a phrase that descends. This type of pattern is very common in the jazz world. And we could get some interesting coloring here. D, C, B flat, right? We could play it. It's, of course, a little 3-blind mice in, but that's okay. This would be one possibility. If we wanted something that was like a little bit more brilliant or sort of open, then we'd probably want this note to ascend, right? Or another possibility would be maybe we have a longer phrase that eventually is going to sort of peak in this measure, right? In this case, something that might be anticipating this F major, like maybe a G up here. In which case, we could have a longer line that maybe would look something like this. Right? And then, one of the other ideas that I suggested here was this displacing a rhythmic phrase by 1/8 note. Right? So in this case, we have the and a 1, 3, and the and a 4. So in this case, what if we just kept this sort of like, in this case, it would almost be like a 3 against 4 thing going, where this phrase will start there, and then something like that. How do we feel about this? It's okay. I don't love it. But ideas that could work is if we turn this into like a pickup, maybe. Sort of. I do like the sort of 3 against 4 idea. So in this case, I might just do something like that. Yeah, almost. This phrase here is yeah, I love that. I'm gonna try that. Yeah, the MIDI playback is not best here. And I like putting accents here on the and a 4 to help make sure everybody plays that. I also sort of hear this phrase as starting quiet and then crescendoing. And then, we have that. It's pretty good. Now we still have 3 notes possible here for this chord, right? And what I sort of want to do is do something that's like something that's going to bring us to E minor 7, but maybe some type of 8th note pickup. And so, of course, knowing that the notes in E minor 7 flat 5 are E, G, B flat, and D, something that brings us there in sort of an interesting way. My initial reaction maybe something like this. And again, if we only get 3 notes per measure and only 1 downbeat, it means the next 2 notes will also have to be on upbeats. So we could have something like that. And this might bring us nicely to D if we wanted the root. Yeah, I don't like it. We're going to play it again, but I don't like it. So first thing I'm going to try is the range here is sort of a bummer because we have this big phrase and then it just like went down an octave and it's just like sort of sad. So if I bring it up to this sort of brilliant range where the trumpets ended, right? Yeah, I think I don't like the rhythm. So this breaks our rule a little bit here. Because I think we actually have 4 notes in this measure, but it's fine. And then maybe we'll have sort of a descending line. I also want to add in B. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and over-articulate these. Give me 1 second here. All right. BD dot dot. Listen to this one more time. Maybe. You know what? I'm actually going to just be content with the end of that phrase, I think. And then I might start like something that's sort of a similar shape for these last 4 measures, something that sort of goes up the same way, that has maybe like a slightly different tag. Okay. So now we get to the fun part here. Okay. What do you think about harmonizing it? So we've already written in. Actually, I'm gonna give one more dynamic. BD dot forte piano. Yeah. All right. So now we can move this into the other trumpet parts. And we can think a little bit about harmonization, right? So if we try to harmonize this G and move down, right? Whatever method we use, trumpet 4 is going to be pretty low. And I think what might be a cooler effect is we'll just keep the trumpets starting in unison, and then as the phrase goes, we'll break into harmony. Okay? And I think what we might do is we might keep the first 2 notes unison, and then for this G minor chord we're anticipating, break into harmony, right? And so remember, one of the strategies we've talked about that you can use triads. So if there was a B flat triad, a B flat in a triad that connects to G minor, we would use that, right? And we don't want to use the root triad, so we could use B flat major. That's probably our best bet here. So if we were doing a B flat major triad, we'd probably do that would be F. And then this is always tricky because this note could get pretty gross. And so we don't have like terrible voice leading later. I think what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to keep those 2 playing the same notes. 3rd is going to play the F, and 4th is going to go play the D. Now, depending on your style of arranging and how you sort of see the rest of these lines, that could change. But in this case, this should be fine. The C, right? There's a few different ways we could think about the C. We could think of the C as being part of G minor, right? Or we could think about the C as being anticipated of C7, right? Either one is pretty good. And I should show you at this point one little helpful technique to help make sure we keep all of this organized, which is copying this into the piano part and turning into slashes with stems, and then dragging these chords over so we know exactly what's hitting where. And of course, this will also be very helpful for your pianist. So in this case, I think what I want to do actually is I might give two different sort of like G minor flavors. Right? We might do another G minor, but this one that has the 11th. Right? And we're just going to start with that, but again, we might change it. So if we think about tones that might have the 11th in it for G minor, right? We could have A minor, which would give us like G minor 13, because that would be A, C, E, and E is the 13th of G minor, which might be more than we want. There's F major, which would give us the 7th, 9th, and 11th, which seems pretty safe. And then there is A minor, F, and C major, which I think would be pretty gross. That would probably be the strangest, unless we just wanted to to change the chord as a whole. The other thing we could do is we could actually do like C sus here, which could actually be sort of cool. Actually, we might do that. So with a C sus chord, this person could play the 5th. This person could play that tone, and this person would double that there. Let's see how this sounds. I don't hate it. I don't hate it. The melody note here is D, so we can change this to a C9 because D is the 9th of C. And I guess we could come up with any voicing we would want here, whether we could use D as it relates to C9. We could use a G minor triad, right? Which would give us something that looks like this. And this guy would be there, right? That might be fine. We'll listen to it. Now, one thing that's sort of happening here we want to be aware of is you'll notice that trumpet 4 is sort of moving almost away from trumpet 1. This type of motion is cool, but it doesn't always result in fluid voice leading as we go along, and also has the potential of just creating a very bizarre trumpet 4 part. For now, I'm not sure if there's a sort of a convenient fix, but we're just going to keep going and see what happens. Here we have the note G over the F major 7, right? So now this, since G is the 9th, we could just say this is F major 9. And of course, like the most obvious triad for this would be C major over F, right? That would be the 5, the 7th, and the 9th. Right? Pretty interesting. And then finally, we can finish this phrase here. We know we're going to be anticipating this E minor 7. And we know those two beats will probably be slash marks. So we'll just go ahead and write that in. So now, what do we want to do with this little phrase? BD dot dot. Right? I think there's a few possibilities. We want something that leads to E minor. And so if we were to go backwards from E minor, E, F, F sharp, G, that might be one way to do it, right? We could, instead of thinking like the 7th, we could think the like relative minor. This would be like F minor 7. But in this case, F minor 7 might fall there. And then we could just go up chromatically. Right? This might give us a cool little chromatic passage. The only problem with this is that's a funky note, A flat. So if we were to sort of continue to tweak this, we could do A flat, G minor, right? That'd be a possibility. We could also just treat them as dominant chords, right? Either one might be possible. I think for our purposes, let's just see what happens if we treat them as dominant chords. Since we're adding in some harmony now, I'm going to keep this F minor as is, I think. Now, if A flat is your root note, and you have an A flat 7 chord, there's a few possibilities, right? We could have F minor, which might make the most sense. That would give us the 13, the root and the third, right? F minor would. Is there anything else would be interesting? E major would be another possibility. That would give us like some outtones. We can try each of those. So if we said we're gonna do F minor, right? That would mean this is a 13th chord. Right? And then to keep things consistent, because otherwise they'll sound too strange, we're going to make these all 13th chords and basically just voice lead things the same way. Right? So here we use an F minor chord. So G, we're going to use an E minor chord. And then for F, we're going to use a D minor chord. Right, and then we have this E half diminished chord. That is one of the hardest chords to voice, in my opinion. And we're going to do something like that. Sounds fine. Sounds fine. Let's fix a few things on the low end, and then we're going to go back and revisit maybe some other possibilities for those eighth notes. I'll play it again first, though. Fine. We don't want to forget about our trombones here. So I'm going to make sure I select all of this, and I'm going to start from trombone 4. All right. And for our purposes, to keep everything just as obvious as possible, I'm just going to have bass trombone play the roots. Yeah. I might. Not sure where I want to put that part yet. And then in trombone 3, sorry, I am going to opt for having them play the sevenths of these chords, or some type of voice leading that starts at least with the seventh. It's going to create some very interesting melodic shapes in here. Right, in this case, bass bone and third trombone are pretty close together here at the end, but that's fine. And then second trombone, I am going to go ahead and we're going to put the a line that starts with the third. So here we have like our shell voicing, right? The root, the seventh, and the third. And, you know, then everything is just sort of voice led from this, right? So in this case, this would be the seventh, the third, going to the seventh, going to the third, going to the seventh, staying on the seventh. This is the only weird part here. Going to the seventh, It's a little gross. And then, yeah, see, here's where things like seem to get a little bit weird with this particular approach, right? Is if I have the root, the third, and then the seventh, look how high second bone is, and that just might be too high for what we want. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop that part down there, and I'm actually going to change second bone so that second bone will have all the we're going to have all the sevenths, and then I screwed that up. Second bone will have all the thirds, right? And then I am going to, well, let's listen to this first before I decide what happens with lead bone. It's fine. Is there one weird note in here? Yeah, that note. We'll listen again. Oh, sorry, that should be G. Yeah. This melody note is an interesting one. The C here. You know, there's some other like chromatic possibilities that might be more interesting, but I'm not sure. We'll go into that now. Right? Totally fine. I'm not going to copy lead bone in yet. Remember, when we were looking at these dominant chords, one of the other possibilities I mentioned for this, a triad that might work for the trumpets, was an E major triad, right? And an E major triad over this chord would give us a flat 13 and a sharp 9, which we could probably just summarize by calling alt, or we can be more specific and say sharp 9, flat 13. And of course, like what we'll want to do is we're just going to change all of these to the same quality, so we have some consistency. Notice that I'm actually doing this before we play it, which is probably a mistake because I don't know if we'll like it more or not, but I just don't want to forget this detail, right? And the only notes we have to change are the ones in the trumpets right now, because the trombones are just playing the shell voicing, the root, third, and seventh of what's happening below. So in this case, to make this into an E major triad, we should actually be able to do this, I think. We need E, and then, sorry, this should be A. And then, we need a D flat. Yep, there we go. Because it'll be a E major, E flat major, D flat major. And this was E major, sorry, E flat major, and then D flat major. Let's check this out. We don't have to change fourth trumpet because that's just the first one down an octave. Pretty colorful, right? Pretty interesting, right? And then for the lead bone part, right, we could either double this voice, right? We could double trumpet 4, right? That's totally fine. We could also potentially double trumpet 3, which would also be fine. If we were going to voice this and include the saxes, it's possible that this line, while it is a little bit high, could be a second bone line, and then the trumpet 3 could be trombone 1, and we just shift all this stuff down or double some of these other voices in the saxophones. But for brass only writing, this is probably the safest bet. interesting. I said, no, not necessarily my most favorite thing I've ever written, but I think it's functional and does have some interesting colors in there. If we were to continue writing this phrase, right, some ideas that I've suggested before, and if we go back to this little sort of worksheet ideas, is by doing the Jim McNeely thing. I'm trying to remember to include these in my notes. Right. It's like we could even take this phrase and as like a starting block, copy and paste it in here, but then start by just moving the whole thing over one beat. We could hear how that sounds. It's a little hard to hear without bass. If we were looking at our rules here, we actually have two notes that fall on the downbeat in this bar and in this bar, which again is sort of one of the things we sort of want to avoid. And so what we could do to avoid that is we could move that note back to the and a 4 again. And then it might be forgivable. Yeah, and then I might just want to start from scratch for that last little phrase. And I might figure out something else there. But this video's already gone too long. Finally, last thing that can be helpful, right, is when we're thinking about what can happen in the other parts, right? There's one way this phrase happens, right? And everybody, including bass, would play the ga 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 dee da gang, right? But there might be another way where bass is just like walking through it, and again, the bass line can sort of adhere to the normal harmonic rhythm that existed before. And you know, if we were just like quickly write a bass line, right? Root, half step above the next chord, 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 and half step above the next chord. Although I'm actually sort of tempted here to actually make sure that the bass is playing these sort of new roots that we have. So that would be A flat, G, F, and then E, half step from the next root, root, half step from the next root, root. Right? I talked through that fast, but hopefully you can see sort of what I've done here with that part. Right? Sort of cool thing. We'll play that again. Yeah, and especially if we have the walking bass line underneath it, I would be tempted to also put slashes in the drum part. But again, using Dorico's great cueing system, I would probably cue trumpet 1, so that in that part they have the exact rhythm that the trumpets are playing, so they can set up and fill while also playing time as a part of this. All right, let's hear it one more time. It's pretty good. I think that's it. That gives us 4 bars of a pretty good brass Soli, with some solid ideas in there. And like I said, there were some tweaks where there were some phrases we didn't totally love. We explored some different triad approaches for the trumpets. You don't have to stick to the triad approach, but for our purposes, I think it's a pretty safe start. We created something that's mostly playable. If we look at all these parts, right, there's a few maybe awkward leaps. Like trumpet 2 has an awkward leap here with this B flat to G, maybe. And some of the inner parts don't move in the same direction as the lead line, but I don't think it's terribly disruptive. Right. Another thing you could possibly do too, right, is if we wanted to, get even more wide range there. The other thing we could also have some tritone subs if we wanted, right, and just have this whole thing be tritone subs in the bass. Right, if we were to do that, you can see it sort of gets a little bit muddy with the bass, and it's probably better to have the bass double that part so that nothing gets too weird. Right? Almost works. I'm not sure I like that more than what we initially had, so I'm going to just undo all of that. And there's one other change I'm going to make here, just to avoid having the having so much of the root doubled in this chord, just to get us a little bit more color. I'm going to do that. See how we like that. I don't know if I love that either. But these are tweaking things that I'll sort of make as we go. All right. Hopefully you can see how this gives us a very clear brass Soli that is notated well and mostly playable, that we have some interesting harmony happening there, that we've made some decisions about when to add harmony versus when to just have unison, especially in the trumpets. We're utilizing sort of shell voicings in the bones to sort of give that harmony. And again, it's pretty effective. All right. If you have any questions, let me know.